Module 2 Military Grade Survival Mindset Secrets. Survival is about more than just knowledge. An in-depth understanding of survival techniques can be an invaluable asset when faced with a crisis situation. However, the single most powerful ally imaginable is your own mindset. The human brain is capable of some truly amazing things. This is especially true when enduring the stress of imminent danger. Interestingly enough, all military-issued survival guides begin with sections explaining the mindset required to survive before actually providing the reader with physical survival techniques. This is a testament to how imperative the proper mindset is when survival is in question. Stories abound of people who have survived literally against all odds simply because their will to do so was not shaken. 95% of people die in the first 3 days of survival situations without this. People are faced with survival situations all the time. Of course, some provide an image of imminent death, while others simply remove comfort for a period of time. The difference between those who survive and those who do not can often be attributed to a single trait: the will to survive. Studies have shown that as much as 95% of people who die of psychological trauma do so within the first 3 days. Breaking down mentally will compromise your chances of survival more than any other single factor. There have been cases where people have eaten their own belts for nourishment or survived in the desert for days and somehow did not succumb to dehydration despite losing 25% of their body mass. Almost as frequently are those who, when faced with a stressful situation, take their own life rather than make an attempt to survive, even though help may only be a day or two away. Although the will to survive cannot be traced back to a single gene, it has been proven time and time again that it alone can be enough when all odds are seemingly against you. The mind is capable of overcoming incomprehensible amounts of stress. This is never more apparent than in survival situations. The mind will be faced with many challenges. Understanding them in advance will make transitioning between them much easier. Most individuals will experience shock initially, specifically called psychogenic shock. It occurs as a result of extreme psychological and emotional stress. This is known as the crisis stage, and if not controlled, can lead to irrational thought and outright panic, neither of which is conducive to survival. In a group situation, a natural leader may emerge capable of directing the group and gaining control of the situation. A single person will have to work hard to lead themselves and gain control of their mental faculties. Initially, all survivors are controlled externally by the environment in which they find themselves. The key to changing this dynamic is to begin formulating a plan. The plan need not be elaborate. Focus on the keys to survival, which will vary based on the situation, and formulate an action plan with these in mind. It will help minimize the mortality risk right from the start and increase the chances of being rescued in some cases. The coping period follows the initial crisis onset. During this time, the survivor realizes the gravity of the situation and must take appropriate action. Appropriate action can mean many different things, including doing nothing at all. Often, you may feel the urge to move, just to feel as though you are doing something productive, when in fact, moving from your location may be counterproductive. Even when faced with hunger and severe cold, rational thought must prevail. Recalling training can reduce the likelihood that panic will dominate and ensure you are making rational decisions consistently. Remember that people have survived for up to 3 weeks without food, although it may not seem that way when hunger strikes. It's important to remember these things before making hasty survival decisions. The ability to control emotions and thought processes is far more valuable than food during the early stages of survival. The will to survive is not something that can be taught per se. It is a combination of training techniques to minimize psychological stressors combined with one's own determination to beat the odds. How to mold your mind like a Navy SEAL. The Navy SEAL training program is a perfect example of how the mind can be more powerful than the body. As much as 75% of applicants entering the SEAL training program fail. After carefully examining the results, Navy psychologists determined that most of these failures were not related to physical ability. In other words, the SEAL candidates are capable of completing the tasks, but for some reason, they were dropping out like flies. Mentally, these men were not fit for the challenges presented to them. Keep in mind add that SEAL candidates tend to be of above average intelligence, so the problem is not an IQ deficiency. Rather, the problem lies in the mind's innate ability to react to stress. Overcoming the mind's natural propensity to handle stress in a certain way is the key to surviving seemingly insurmountable odds. By implementing some mental training into the SEAL curriculum, dropouts have decreased drastically. The same survival mindset tricks can be used by anyone. These tools can make the difference between life and death when faced with a survival situation. The life-saving truth about goals. Read this now. Goal setting is not limited to lofty, sometimes ambiguous long-term goals about your career or family. It is important to set short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. Focusing the mind on surviving the next 5 minutes will be much easier to attain than thinking about the long-term consequences of surviving a situation. This is considered a short-term goal. A mid-term goal might be surviving the day and finding shelter for the evening. The human brain tends to think long-term, and this train of thought can be very dangerous in a situation that can demand split-second decisions. SEAL candidates are taught this very technique. By thinking about making it through the next 5 minutes, it takes away the hopeless feelings that can arise by focusing on the long term. Similar techniques are taught to recovering addicts. By focusing on making it through an urge to use, the chances are greatly increased that the individual will be successful. How Navy SEALs survive having their oxygen ripped out, and how you can use their strategy to defeat tricky situations. During the underwater testing portion of SEAL training, the instructor will swim underwater and sabotage the candidate's air supply. The primal fear of drowning is initiated and can leave candidates disoriented and unable to perform. Studies have shown that those who visualize successfully completing the exercise before beginning were much more successful in this portion of the test. Practicing the techniques in your head before completing a task increases the chance of success. Rehearsing the proper technique for hunting an animal, scaling a rock face, or finding shelter will allow the mind to cope with the idea that you will be better prepared for unexpected circumstances that may arrive during the activity. Do not say the wrong 7,000 words in a crisis. Studies have shown that people can talk to themselves as fast as 7,000 words per minute. If the majority of these thoughts are negative, failure is certain. Learning to maintain positive self-talk is another key to a proper survival mindset. Managing self-talk begins by realizing how often it occurs. Then you must challenge these thoughts. "I'll never find food" is a negative thought. Challenge it. Although it may seem like no food is available, realize that never is a very strong word, and the reality is that food might be right around the corner. Focus instead on what has already been accomplished, and the mind will begin to think more positively. Many successful survivors have even used mantras to maintain positive thinking. Something as simple as survival or man or woman of action, repeated consistently throughout the day, can strike a chord within that will increase the chances of survival. Newsflash: Navy SEAL uses hippie technique to control crucial brain chemicals, and you can too. Stress reactions can be helpful. They can also be deadly. As the bloodstream is flooded with chemicals from the brain, cortisol, adrenaline, and others, the body becomes very reactive. Physical and mental training are easily lost in stressful situations. By focusing on breathing, your attention is temporarily shifted away from the situation, allowing the brain to stabilize. Now it becomes possible to think logically and still benefit from the physical performance boost afforded by the hormone influx. Attempt to exhale more deeply than you inhale. This will unconsciously slow down breathing and heart rate. It can also help to further the relaxation that occurs when performing a breathing exercise, because it ensures that as much carbon dioxide-rich air is being replaced with fresh, oxygenated air as possible. Often during survival situations, the brain is already starved for nutrients, and the additional oxygen can help to rejuvenate the mind. Try this exercise to learn controlled breathing techniques. Step 1. Focus on breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. Step 2. Concentrate on exhaling deeply. Contracting your stomach muscles helps. Step 3. Focus on nothing else other than the deep breathing. If your mind begins to wander, gently redirect it back to breathing. This exercise is very similar to techniques used for meditation. Focusing on breathing alone allows your mind to relax and regain composure under even the utmost stress. After just a few minutes of this, reevaluate the situation. A few controlled deep breaths is all that's required. With practice, this becomes second nature and provides much better control of the body's natural responses to fear. Navy SEALs are known to be calm under pressure. Practicing these techniques will prepare you mentally for survival in any situation. Knowledge is a powerful survival asset, so is proper preparedness. The first thing you must do in any survival situation. Without this, panic can attack and shake you like a rabid dog. Making a plan for survival lies in the gray area between a mindset skill and a physical survival skill because it encompasses both. From a mental perspective, creating a plan provides a few benefits. First, the creation of a solid action plan reduces the likelihood of emotional disturbance. A plan provides hope, a method for getting through the catastrophe. A good plan generates hope and will help to relieve anxiety or even depression. It is best to make a plan shortly after finding yourself in a survival situation. After assessing the situation and the surrounding environment, decide what the top priorities are. Is it a cold area? Then heat and shelter should be of the highest priority. Establishing a list of tasks is not only a good general survival practice, it is also one of the best ways to stave off emotional distractions before they can occur. Creating the plan in the beginning also eliminates clouded decision-making due to hunger, thirst, or an injury that you may encounter later in the situation. Making a quick action plan is simple. Step 1. Assess the highest priority items for survival based on the environmental conditions. Step 2. Determine how to best attain or create the goals from Step 1. Step 3. Take each task and break it down into a more manageable subtask. Step 4. Begin taking action. Step 5. Assess your progress. This builds self-confidence and combats hopelessness. Humans can survive for 3 days without water and up to 3 weeks without food. Taking a little time to assess the situation and make a plan will not be detrimental, excluding imminent danger, and is the best foundation possible for making it home alive. How World War II Marines saved a sunken submarine, and how you can use this technique to never feel overwhelmed. Countless survivors have been debriefed after successfully battling the elements and winning. The one common denominator among all these stories is not the expensive gear they may or may have not had. The skill that each of these people used to survive is available to anyone. It is the ability to think sequentially. The adage, think big, does not apply here. In fact, the opposite is true. Thinking small and focusing on direct actions forces your brain to think logically and regain composure even in times of extreme stress. During World War II, the USS Indianapolis was struck by a torpedo and sank. Hundreds of sailors were thrown into the water. A Marine on board, covered in oil from the massive oil slicks covering the ocean's surface, barely made it to a life raft. His mouth was full of vomit and fuel. Sailors in the life raft were injured badly. What this Marine did next is exactly the same concept that will keep you alive. He cleaned his pistol. There was no danger where he might need the pistol. He cleaned it because it was a simple, direct action that forced his brain to think logically. He went a step further and directed the injured and frantic sailors on the life raft with him to hold pieces of the pistol as he disassembled it. Already, he had regained enough mental capacity to realize that this simple act would really help his ailing shipmates. Breaking down large tasks into small chunks may seem counterintuitive. However, even in times of great stress, the brain can handle these little tasks, and combined, these little tasks equal the same large task. The difference is in presentation. Do not think about how impossible it will be to climb the rock face in front of you. Without climbing experience, it may seem impossible. Instead, focus on climbing just 5 feet up, then 10 feet, etc. U.S. military research proves this one thing is vital. Sleep is essential to survival, even when not in a survival situation. Lack of sleep can produce effects similar to drunkenness in as little as 24 hours. Hallucinations and temporary psychosis are soon to follow. Military studies have shown that soldiers awake for more than 24 hours continuously begin to fall into microsleep. These short, involuntary bursts of sleep may only last a second or two, but in a perilous situation, that can be the difference between life and death. In 2004, a study was done at the University of California that evaluated the performance of medical students based on the amount of sleep they received. Students that got less than 4 hours of sleep made twice as many medical errors as those who got 7 to 8 hours sleep. A similar study done by the U.S. Navy concluded that SEAL candidates showed significant signs of fatigue after 72 hours without sleep. Specifically, shooting accuracy decreased by almost 40% without sleep. Cognitive abilities such as memory, attention, visual spatial ability, and risk-taking are all affected by lack of sleep. Data analysis and decision-making capabilities are also hindered. Even food deprivation does not have the devastating effects on mental ability that lack of sleep can. Although the stress of a survival situation can be high, sleep is an integral part of the survival mindset and should not be overlooked. Military survival manuals recommend alternating sleep cycles with others, if you should be so lucky as to have companions in a survival situation, because it will ensure that at least someone in the group will be functioning at a sufficient cognitive level when a crisis arises. Even napping for as little as 20 minutes at a time can have beneficial effects on your overall well-being and situational awareness. Once the basics of food and shelter have been established, achieving some degree of rest should be your next priority. The health of your mental faculties will depend on this in order to stay sharp and implement the other techniques necessary for survival. The untold truth about emotions and survival. Military survival manuals spend a great deal of time discussing the various feelings that may be encountered while in a survival situation. This is due in large part to the experiences of properly equipped servicemen and women who have taken their own lives rather than continue to serve against the odds. There are stories of pilots killing themselves despite having adequate food and water supplies. Why? These individuals lost hope and ultimately the will to survive. Hopelessness, fear, isolation, frustration, and fatigue are just a few of the emotions that you will experience during this stressful time. Below is a list of common emotional factors along with suggestions for how to cope with each. Fear is a natural emotion and certainly one that can mean the difference between life and death. Fear has been known to allow people to accomplish extraordinary things, while others become paralyzed by it. These steps will help you master fear. Step 1. Understand fear. Step 2. Admit that it exists. Step 3. Accept it as a reality. By relying on training and past experiences, you'll find your self-confidence improves. As this occurs, fear will subside to a controllable level. Setting small, achievable goals and completing them will help to bolster self-confidence, diminish fear, and greatly increase the chances of survival. Anxiety is similar to fear, although it's not as intense. It is often associated with butterflies in your stomach or the general feeling that something bad will happen. This emotion can be overcome by adopting a simple plan and adhering to it almost religiously. Prisoners of war have even gone so far as to try teaching their captors English while learning the native language. Although seemingly frivolous, this behavior leads to reduced anxiety. Essentially, anything that will keep your mind from the negativity of the situation will help to reduce these feelings. Anger is an emotion that can severely impair good judgment. Anger can arise over many things in a survival situation. It can stem from frustration or bubble up for almost any other reason. If the situation permits and it will not endanger you further, screaming or walking away from the immediate area is often enough to keep this emotion at bay. Loneliness can become a serious concern. Humans are social beings, and often the social interactions encountered daily can be taken for granted. Dealing with loneliness can be very difficult for some. Setting simple, achievable goals will increase self-confidence. Increased self-confidence leads to increased self-sufficiency, both of which help to curb feelings of loneliness in a stressful situation. Remaining active and adhering to the survival plan will help to keep the mind from wandering into this dangerous territory. Boredom can become a factor, especially in long survival situations. Coping with boredom can be a difficult task. Often, survival can be a very repetitive task. Taking frequent breaks and reminding yourself of the importance of the task at hand in relation to the survival plan can help. Sometimes inventing unique tasks can help as well. The U.S. Air Force Survival Handbook recounts the story of a survivor imprisoned in a hut that began killing flies and feeding them to non-lethal spiders. Although this task may seem silly at first, it was how this individual was able to cope with weeks of doing nothing. Hopelessness stems from the feeling that no matter what transpires, the outcome will not be favorable. It is important to realize that no matter how futile a situation may seem, the will to survive is often enough. Countless prisoners have died from what can only be attributed to a willingness to do so. That is to say, they simply gave up. This is a testament to just how powerful the mind can be, and it is essential to not get stuck in this frame of mind. Remembering past training and the ability to accept alternate means to achieve goals can help to minimize the hopelessness that may arise. How to build up brain armor to protect against any survival situation. From a psychology perspective, coping is defined as the constantly changing cognitive and behavioral efforts to manage specific external and/or internal demands that are appraised as taxing. E.M. Cummings et al., Lifespan Developmental Psychology, 1991, page 92. Survival is mentally taxing. Probably more than anything you have ever experienced, survival will test the absolute mental boundaries of anyone. The body and mind are preconditioned to react to stress. Sometimes these reactions are helpful. The adrenaline kick experienced at being attacked by a bear, for instance, allows you to run faster and farther. Sometimes these reactions are not beneficial, though. The feeling of depression after not eating for a couple of days can lead to negative thought processes that are detrimental to survival. Learning the proper techniques to deal with the many stressors of a survival situation is a key component to a successful survival mindset. Some of these techniques will be learned through trial and error as you struggle to survive. Others can be practiced in daily life so they become a valuable part of your inventory when the need arises. Training is an important strategy for survival. This includes mental training as well as possessing a physical survival skill set. Knowledge of the area you are in beforehand, practice using your equipment, and having an understanding of what to expect in a survival situation are all important aspects of success. Motivation, similar to the will to survive previously discussed, is a quintessential trait. Some survivors convince themselves that they are simply not meant to die in these conditions, while others may focus on loved ones at home to provide the motivation required. In either case, having something to look forward to cannot be duplicated with any tools you might be carrying in your pack. Attachment and motivation often go hand in hand. Attachment refers to the desire to be reunited with loved ones. The love for family and friends can manifest itself as a searing will to survive when survival is questioned. In a dire situation, hope can be simply defined as the absence of hopelessness. Maintaining a positive outlook is one of the most difficult coping strategies to master, but it is one that is essential. Without hope for an improvement, no matter how small in the situation, there is little chance that any other component of a survival mindset will work effectively. Consistently working to develop a positive mental outlook will pay big dividends when your life depends on it. Acceptance of a situation is not to be confused with giving in. In fact, those who fail to accept the situation have a far greater chance for failure due to the irrational decision-making and uncontrollable emotions that often ensue. Learning to accept a situation for its face value is a trait that, although useful in many aspects of life, is especially prevalent in a survival situation. Helping others win in a group situation can be beneficial to your own coping mechanism. Simple psychological support, such as encouraging words, is sometimes all that's required for those who have failed to adjust properly. Whether this works or not, it tends to have a calming effect on everyone. At all costs, avoid dispensing sedatives that may be on hand to help others cope. This can exacerbate the onset of psychotic symptoms often associated with stressful situations. In addition to these strategies, there are many other proven ways to prepare you mentally for the challenges that you will surely encounter. Taking an honest personal inventory is extremely important. Understanding innate strengths and weaknesses will allow you to develop areas where you may be deficient. Even asking family and friends who know you well can be helpful. Often, they may point out areas of weakness that you were not aware of. Fear has already been discussed as a real factor in survival. It is important to realize that fear is inevitable. To pretend that you will not experience this powerful emotion during a survival situation is to walk the line of ignorance. Fear is nothing to be ashamed of and can be a useful tool when understood, anticipated, and controlled. Try not to eliminate fear, for that is impossible. Instead, work to build confidence in your ability to function despite your fears. Relaxation skills are a powerful asset as well. As a stress management technique, relaxation can clear your mind. A clear mind results in clear decision making. Some may relax by meditating or praying. Some by thinking about a favorite vacation spot. Learning how to calm down in spite of insurmountable odds will play a major role in your mind's ability to cope successfully. Never underestimate the power of emotion. Always remember what's at stake. Depression, hopelessness, anxiety, and mental fatigue are not just words in a psychology textbook. They are real things that will occur if you fail to maintain a positive attitude. There is more to survival than just knowing how to start a fire or build a suitable shelter. These skills are extremely important, but many have survived unimaginable conditions without this knowledge. The will to survive, coupled with the mental skills required to keep your mind working for you and not against you, is the single most important asset a survivor has. Let it slip away with thoughts of desperation and self-pity, and the human brain is fiercer than a brown bear. Leveraged effectively, these mental skills are the breeding ground for a survival mindset. A survival mindset is the difference between being a survivor and a statistic. Recap. Wow, that took longer than I thought. Here's what you should remember from this module. Most of the times, disaster victims die from stress-induced psychological reasons. Learn to control yourself and your chances of survival increase dramatically. Learn to make short-term goals from 5 minutes to several hours to adapt your goal-setting mechanism in emergency situations. Visualize yourself in a disaster and how you successfully survive it. Visualization exercises are very powerful. In stressful situations, learn to break down large tasks into smaller ones. Lastly, accept fear. Accept that you'll be afraid of what comes and you'll be more at peace with yourself.